Hello, everybody. This is your one and only time traveling Gallifreyan Time Martin Murphy's Law, bringing you video blog number 12, my Navy experiences. This will be part 3, and I'll be discussing Hawaii. On my last episode, I talked about experiences in Italy. This time, I will be talking about the beautiful state of Hawaii and my adventures there. Having lived there for 5 years, it's probably going to be a lot of stuff, so I'll be discussing more of it in my next part. While in the Navy, I had a chance to visit there 3 times, and actually lived there for about 5 years, from about 1998 to 2002. I was stationed aboard Pearl Harbor, Oahu, and worked for CINCPAC Fleet, which at that time would be Commander-in-Chief, now just Commander, U.S. Pacific Fleet. One of the things is, even though I was there for a bit of time, the only other island outside of Oahu that I got to visit was uh, the island of Hawaii, called the Big Island, in order to avoid confusion with the state's name. I'll probably be discussing that in the part 4 of my travel log, which would be like part 2 of Hawaii visit. Now, Oahu, if you'll excuse me from being cliche, was actually quite beautiful. I mean, it was definitely paradise. You had mountains, you had beautiful forests, you had waterfalls, you had the ocean surrounding you, you had coral reefs, beaches, a little bit of everything. Now, the island was kind of small. It's like the second largest island, but you could drive around it in about, at a leisurely pace at about 3 hours. So, but even with that, there was still quite a bit to find there that you could do. I mean, you've got hiking, snorkeling, diving, surfboarding, and there's just all sorts of sights to see. One of those sites that I would commonly go for weekends, especially 3-day weekends, was a place called Hanauma Bay. Now, I would get there early in the morning to avoid the large crowds, um, rent out some snorkeling equipment, and go swimming around since they had a lot of coral reefs there. Now, while snorkeling or diving, you'd have to use special gloves and boots because those coral reefs could be very sharp. You get to see a lot of the fish there, and even every once in a while, a few of the moray eels poking their heads out of the coral. It was especially fun getting there like before sunrise because you'd be swimming along, and then the sun would hit the water, and it was just the whole place would just light up, and all the fish would suddenly show all of their beautiful colors. So it was definitely a place to relax, especially if you've had a rough week. Um, just sit by a lot of times I would just lay out on a towel and just listen to the waves wash by. Another of the famous sites in Hawaii was a place called Diamond Head. Now, I'm sure if any of those who have seen Hawaii Five-0, that the site is shown all the time. You see the cities of Hawaii and Honolulu and Waikiki, and then off in the distance you see this tall mountain. That would be Diamond Head. Now, you actually get a chance to walk up to it, though it was not for one walking if you had heart problems, a lot of health problems. It was definitely a bit of exercise, let me tell you that. Because you go up this long trail, then you got to climb up 99 steps, although there were actually more than that, but there were 99 numbered steps. Then you'd go inside the mountain. Now, before you get in to the actual park, there would be people outside that would give you a flashlight and sell a bottle of water. The flashlight was necessary because even in the brightest of day, and there were plenty in Hawaii, that you would be there. Once you got inside the mountain, the stone was such that it would absorb all light and it would be completely pitch black. You literally could not see your paw in front of your face. So, uh, those flashlights would definitely needed to help you show where you were going. Once inside, then you would go up a spiral staircase Then you'd finally get out to more light, get up to the spot where you'd have to duck real low to get under an overhang created by rocks, and then to do a little bit more hiking to get to the top. Now, it was kind of definitely a trip that would probably leave you out of breath, but the top itself was breathtaking, if you'll excuse my pun. Once at the top, you got to see Hawaii, Honolulu, and Waikiki, and even a little bit way beyond that. I mean, it was miles away, but you could see for quite some time, and a bit of the ocean all around you. I'd say it's definitely worth the trip and worth the hike if you can make it. Again, some water, a flashlight, a cap, hiking boots. Those would definitely be needed during that time. Now, once you got on the east coast of Hawaii, there was some place called Sea Life Park, which was the mainlanders, that is the continental United States. Um, so it's our version of mainlanders' Sea World Park. It wasn't as big. They didn't have like Shamu or anything, but they had a few exhibits where you could actually go down and play with stingrays, which I got to do. That was pretty fun. Another thing was at the entrance of Sea Life Park, they had this 18-foot tank that had a lot of fish in it and some sharks. They had unicorn fish, and then they had the Hawaiian state fish, the Huma Huma Nuka Nuka Apawa'a. Sorry, I've always wanted to say that. Um, and a lot of fish, and you actually got to dive in it. You would have this diving helmet on. That's the only equipment that you would need. Get down to the bottom, and they would actually give you some food to hold out. It was kind of a little bit nervous to be there that close to sharks with no protection between you, but we aren't talking like great whites or anything like Jaws. So, and from what I remember, they weren't like the adult, 20-foot long sharks. They were kind of the juvenile ones, but still, they could probably do a lot of damage if they had been aggressive. So, you always had to keep that in mind. It was still fun. Now, who could be stationed on Pearl Harbor and work there without visiting the Arizona Memorial, especially someone like me that was in the Navy? It was kind of part of our history. Now, once you got inside the museum part, excuse me, they had all the little displays and whatnot. But one of the things that you did before going to the actual um, memorial was to watch the movie regarding the Pearl Harbor attack, and it was definitely a sobering one that really got me emotional, especially thinking about how the how what was going through the people's minds, during this surprise attack, and just the hopelessness and everything that was going on. But it definitely brought what the whole thing was about to mind, so that it wasn't just something that was fun or exciting. It was about all those people who died there. Anyway, once you got to the memorial, you would go across this concrete walkway, and you would go over certain parts of the ship, which was sunk underwater. Now, while you were looking down, you could see bubbles of oil that would float to the surface. These bubbles of oil were called the tears of Arizona, and the legend goes that they were the tears of the 900 sailors who had died on board the ship, and they would continue to come up as long as there was still Pearl Harbor veteran survivors, which unfortunately there are no more, as the last one died back in February. Once you got inside, you saw this wall with the names of all of the sailors on it. So it was definitely a place for contemplation and for just thinking about what happened there. Now, outside of the Arizona Memorial Museum, you also got to see the USS Bowfin, which was nicknamed the Pearl Harbor Avenger. USS Bowfin was a World War II submarine, and it was nothing like any of our modern submarines. I will. I'm not afraid to admit that that is not some place I would have been stationed aboard. I'm extremely claustrophobic, and that was definitely a tin can. It was definitely like being inside a tuna can. The ceilings were just barely above your head. The walkways were maybe wide enough for two people to go through if they exhaled and, you know, sort of squeezed by each other. The um, the staterooms and whatnot were like 5 by 5 maybe. So I mean, if you stretched your arms out, you'd probably be touching the sides. There weren't bunks enough for everybody, so they did what they call hot bunking, which is like during the daytime you'd have some people sleep, and then they would work, and then the night shift would sleep in the same bunks. One of the rather frightening aspects of the ship was the fact that some of the bunks were actually on top of the torpedoes. And I can tell you this, I would not have been able to, even if I was one to serve aboard the USS Bowfin, I would not have been able to get any sleep if I had to sleep on those things. I mean, how could you possibly get any peace of mind knowing that your bed, as such, was something designed to make an earth-shattering boom if something went wrong? But I guess they had to do it somehow, and I'm pretty sure they did. While at the museum, there were also certain missiles that you got to see, and inside you got to see some of the medals that were worn and the control panels. So it was definitely something worth visiting. Uh, you also got to go past a lot of beautiful neighborhoods like Ka'ava and Halawa and a few other places. So about the only place that it was recommended that you not go on Oahu was on the western coast. Now, while most of the people were very friendly and welcoming, evidently on the western coast, a lot of the local youths there were kind of separationists. They were people who sort of blamed the U.S. for uh, annexing Hawaii into the U.S. Uh, and while not to get too much into politics, they do have kind of a point because our annexation of it was slightly bit on the illegal side. So, but there was one officer I worked with that unfortunately did have a confrontation with one of these local youths. And considering the normal Polynesian Samoan type, they these guys can be really big, like several hundred pounds, and not just like for us that would be kind of overweight and you wouldn't be able to move. These would be rather more solidly built. So, but again, on the whole, the Hawaiian people were extremely friendly. Like a lot of the women would be referred to as auntie, for instance. The food was pretty good there. They had, of course, a lot of pineapple. I wasn't real crazy about it, but it was nice. They also had poi, which I've tasted. Again, I wasn't too crazy about it, but that's not really saying anything about the food. It was just about me. Um, After living 5 years there, you did tend to get a little bit rock crazy, which is kind of like sort of the opposite of stir crazy. That you're on an island that's isolated from mainland civilization, and a lot of the stuff tended, a lot of the news, whatnot, tended to center around just the island. So you didn't hear much about news in, say, California or in New York or in Georgia or Florida someplace. Now, being there from 1998 to 2002, I was on the island during the 9/11. So I didn't really get to see much of what all happened because on that day, not knowing what was going on, I went to work, and because of the attacks, we were told that all non-essential personnel needed to get back home. I got to see a little bit of it on TV, and I think I was in a little bit of shock at that time, but trying to get home was quite an ordeal. Now, the Pearl Harbor naval base, at least where the barracks were, it had normally 3 gates. And usually it's just going in, showing your ID, and driving through. Because of the attacks, they had shut off 2 of the gates, and of course they were doing a thorough search of your vehicle. And considering how many people were there, it took all day for me to get inside. And uh, unfortunately, my car's battery had actually died, and I actually had to, before it went out, I had to get it to the side of the road. So I had to walk the rest of the way home. And that took many, many hours. So I didn't get to see much, but at least I know. I'd say I know where I was during the attacks. And that's about it for me. I've still got other places of Hawaii, like the Big Island, to talk about, but that'll be in my next blog. So until then, this is Murphy's Law, Gallifrey, and Time Martin signing off. I will continue this in video blog number 13, part 4. So goodbye, and I'll talk with you all later. Have a good one.